The early 1990s were an extremely challenging period for Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, as they attempted to juggle their roles as royals, parents, and spouses. Prince Philip also began spending an increasing amount of time with Penelope Knatchbull, a close friend 32 years his junior. Prince Charles's marriage was on the rocks. This caused friction in the House of Windsor and led to rumours of conflict between Charles and his mother. As all of these conversations happened behind closed doors, fans of the show are fascinated to see how the show's writers tackle these delicate subjects. Have they erred on the side of caution and remained true to public knowledge? Or have they seen this as an opportunity to utilise some creative licence and ramp up the stakes to indulge drama-hungry viewers? Okay, let's have a look into some of the couple's most challenging moments from this period. Penelope Knatchbull. It's a name that season 5 viewers will become pretty familiar with, and she's a woman that was introduced to Prince Philip and the rest of the royal family at just the age of 20 years old. She was known to many as Penny, and at the time was dating her soon-to-be husband Norton Knatchbull. Norton was actually Philip's godson and grandson of the Duke's uncle, Lord Mountbatten. Penny was well educated, having attended school in Switzerland and obtained a business degree from the London School of Economics. And as we see in season 5, Penelope and Philip's real bond begins when Philip offers his support during a really difficult time for Penny and her family, the passing of her 5-year-old daughter Leonora from kidney cancer in 1991. In scenes, Philip's shown trying to convince Penny of her need for a new hobby, something that can take her mind off the very difficult moment she had experienced, and the two begin a well-documented shared love of carriage riding. In one particular scene in this series, we see Philip taking Penny on her first ride as they joke and laugh while riding through the countryside. You know, it's well known that they got on famously, and immediately this is reflected in what is a very upbeat scene from the show. They appear close, friendly, it's a fun moment. Philip teaches Penelope how to properly operate the ropes while riding, and the audience is treated to some suggestive but close-up shots of him holding her hands while demonstrating the correct rope techniques. He's the professional, she's the student. And overall, the scene is dealt with sensitively. There isn't a conclusive accusation that there was anything going on between the two at this particular time. However, there are some other subtle suggestions in this early episode which will only serve to heighten the speculation surrounding their friendship. For example, in one scene, we're informed that Philip has just given Penelope his private phone number for what the writers say is anything that she needs. And during an intimate conversation around her daughter's grave, Prince Philip reveals to Penelope that during marriage, human beings grow in separate directions. These are, of course, all words straight out of the writer's room. No one knows what the conversations were between the pair. But while these scenes neither confirm nor deny the allegations that followed the couple throughout the lifetime of their friendship, they could certainly reignite the ongoing debate around them. In royal correspondent and public circles, much of this debate was fueled by rumours of the late Duke's flirtatious nature. Philip's been described as such by numerous royal reporters over the years, and even the Queen said to have been aware of his flirty nature, joking about it on occasions. I actually went back and looked at some of the coverage at the time, and it refers to what is a flirtatious friendship, a special friendship, and even goes on to question some of the visits that Penelope paid to Prince Philip's home over the years. Philip himself even revealed that he was fully aware of his reputation at the time, telling reporter Jeremy Paxman that every time I talk to a woman, they say I've been to bed with her. These allegations are familiar territory for viewers of The Crown. In season 2, it dramatised several allegations of the Duke's infidelity, including with Russian ballerina Galina Ulanova. Despite the adamance from Philip and the palace that the Penny rumours are nothing more than speculation, this series is really going to spark discussion again, with viewers asked to judge for themselves, once again, if they believe this relationship was an innocent and platonic one, or the start of something much more. As Philip formed new relationships and found new hobbies, the 5th season also depicts the Queen in the midst of an unlikely battle over her capacity as a ruler. Now, this particular storyline has already generated controversy in the press, as well as outcry from those involved. In the season's opening episode, an article from The Times titled "Queen Should Abdicate in Favour of Prince of Wales, Half of British Public Agrees" hits the press, and it causes quite the stir. The article leaves the royal staff so concerned about this explosive moment and the Queen's reaction that they spend much of the episode hiding the paper from her, despite her continuous requests to read it. Charles, on the other hand, seemingly frustrated at his role in waiting, sees this as an opportunity to press his advantage and sets up a secret meeting with Prime Minister at the time, John Major, cutting short his second honeymoon with Diana in the process. It's this secret meeting scene that has already caused division in the public and press. During their sit-down, Prince Charles, in a not-so-subtle manner, suggests to John Major that it's time for a change of personnel on the throne. He begins by citing Margaret Thatcher and Queen Victoria as two examples of leaders who governed for far too long and refused to make way for someone younger with fresh ideas. Charles even later suggests to the Prime Minister that he should judge for himself when visiting Balmoral to assess if the country is in safe hands. However, John Major's visit to Balmoral doesn't really go to plan for Charles, with Major seemingly developing concerns over the entire royal circle. Even goes as far as him describing the junior royals, such as Charles, as entitled and lost, and the senior royals as dangerously deluded and out of touch. Ouch. These scenes of Charles's throne lust are a perfect example of how the Crown's writers are blending historical context, public sentiment, and fiction together to create engaging storylines for audiences. Now, at this point in history, the Queen, 40 years on the throne, was experiencing one of her most disruptive periods as monarch. Questions were certainly being asked throughout Britain about the monarchy's stability as a whole and their cost to the country. Also, it had been rumoured for a long time in royal circles that Prince Charles at this point in time felt ready to take on more responsibility. Reports suggested that he felt impatient in his current role and wanted to bring fresh, innovative ideas to the monarchy. However, this is where that blurred line between fact and fiction by the Crown's writers really becomes apparent, with John Major recently speaking out publicly and strongly denying that there's any truth to these scenes. What's interesting is if you speak to royal correspondents who were on the ground at the time, it was heavily talked about amongst those circles that there were conversations between Charles and the Prime Minister about potentially him taking on a bigger role or even the Queen abdicating. It's later been proven to not be true, but it did make it as far as gossip columnists and even the New York Times. Now, recently, the former Prime Minister didn't mince his words when he was notified of the secret meetings with Charles being portrayed in The Crown. He described them and the series as a barrel load of nonsense. However, in season 5, it isn't only the Queen's role as a monarch that's brought into question, but also her role as a mother. 3 of the Queen's 4 children's marriages were failing, and her disapproval of divorce as head of the Church of England certainly caused friction with them during this period. In the opening episodes of season 5, this inter-family tension is on full display, especially in heated conversations that the Queen has with Princess Anne and Prince Charles. In episode 4, the writers imagine Princess Anne visiting the Queen to inform her of her plans to marry Commander Timothy Lawrence. The Queen suggests that she wait, citing duty, as well as reminding her that remarriage while your first partner is still alive is, well, in their family, forbidden. Anne puts her foot down and departs on the solemn line that this family cannot have all of her. Charles's marriage confrontation with his mother later in the same episode is even more combative. At this point in time, it was obvious to those watching that this was no longer a happy and functional marriage between him and Diana. In fact, fresh off the release of her explosive biography, Charles confronts his mother in the stables for a showdown. He pleads with her, citing his 11 years of attempts to make things work, that she grant her blessing for a separation, a notion that the Queen turns down without any hesitation. An exasperated Charles then yells, "If we were an ordinary family and social services came to visit, They would have thrown us into care and you into jail. It's punchy. And it's a hurtful statement about the Queen as a mother, again, something that the Crown showrunners would have drawn up in the writer's room. There's no real evidence it was ever said at the time, in this context. However, is there any evidence to suggest that the sentiment behind this message was actually justified? Well, it's certainly true that the Queen, along with the rest of the working royals, were required to stick to an intense schedule that did involve constant engagements and continuous travel. Charles and Anne may have been born before Queen Elizabeth became Queen, but it was after her coronation that they both found themselves often left alone while she was away on those duties. Of course, those overseas royal tours in those days would often take weeks, if not months, to complete because of the slower forms of travel. It's also true that Prince Charles felt the effects of this. In his authorised biography in 1994, Charles is quoted as saying it was inevitably the nursery staff who taught him to play and who witnessed his first steps. In the same book, he also said to have described himself as emotionally estranged from his parents and left craving the affection and appreciation which they were ultimately unable to offer. Anne completely disagrees. She's spoken out against these criticisms of her mother, stating that there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that she wasn't caring, and that these allegations simply beggars belief. Regardless, what is seemingly accurate from these scenes is the depiction of the very different relationships that the Queen had with each of her 4 children. The writers have taken creative license in those scenes, provided their own scripts and dialogue, but the treatment's very much a mirror of what we saw in real life. With Andrew, rumoured to be the Queen's favourite at the time and, of course, long beyond, he was seen getting the least pushback against his desire for divorce. Princess Anne, who had a special place as the Queen's only daughter, does eventually get her way, despite the Queen voicing her concerns initially. But with Prince Charles's relationship with his mother, it was said to be far more businesslike. He was the one that had to shoulder the title and burden of being heir to the crown and future head of the Church of England. Therefore, it's fair to say he was held to a much higher standard, as his mother reminds us, and him in the show, right up until the marriage to Diana was beyond repair and she finally caved in. The Crown's portrayal of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip during this period has already sparked some pretty intense debates. There has been outcry from some that the timing and release of season 5 is simply too soon after the passing of the Queen. And by bringing the late monarch's mothering skills into question and suggesting Philip and Penelope form more than just a friendship, this debate is only likely to accelerate. If you enjoyed this episode, then please check out the rest of the series as we continue to break down the most scandalous moments from season 5 of The Crown.